esteemed colleagues, dear participants, I hope you had a good lunch. I'm pleased to welcome you back and to announce that we will now start the second session of the 15th Summit of Women Speakers of Parliament. In this session, we will explore some key developments that are impacting the landscape of peace, security and safety, in particular climate change, artificial intelligence, and online gender-based and racial violence. I would like us, as women speakers and presidents, to uncover the different ways in which these issues are impacting women and girls and reflect together on how our parliaments can respond actively. I look forward to hearing your voices. I'm looking forward to hearing your experiences, as well as some tested solutions and good practice that you might have advanced in your respective contexts. Let us also discuss how we can work together to ensure more inclusive and more gender-responsive approaches to climate action and to the digital transformation. To open the session, I am pleased to invite Mrs. Sophia Kaltorop, Director of the UN Women Geneva Office and Chief of Humanitarian Action, to share with us UN Women's insights on inclusive and responsive climate action, artificial intelligence, and online safety. Mrs. Kaltorop, you have the floor.
Now it's running. Yes. Thank you. Well, good afternoon. President of the National Council of Switzerland, Mrs. Rineker, President of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, Dr. Axon, and esteemed Secretary General of IPU, Mr. Shungong, honorable speakers, deputy speakers, and members of Parliament, distinguished guests, a very good afternoon, and it's a great pleasure and honor for me, as Director of UN Women, to address this gathering today and talk about some of what we at UN Women see as emerging challenges to inclusive and lasting peace and the way forward. And I, of course, look very much forward to the debate and to hear your insights and views on this crucial topic. As we have heard earlier today, this year marks 25 years since the adoption of UN Security Council Resolution number 1325, which is a milestone in recognizing women's central role in peace and security. And yet, despite clear evidence and unwavering advocacy, the full promise of this agenda remains unfulfilled. Political will has fallen short and progress is under threat. Today, we face a very disturbing trend. Resources are shifting away from peace, equality and development towards military spending. And in March this year, we as UN Women surveyed women-led organizations in crisis settings and found out that 90% of them reported financial strain and nearly half may shut down by September this year. Women-led organizations and women's rights organizations are not just responders. They are peace builders. And that is why this trend is so worrisome, because when women's organizations are losing financial support, entire communities lose a vital line of defense against conflict and instability. Women's full and effective participation in peace processes, it is not optional, it is essential to inclusive and lasting peace and security. Funding cuts to education, to healthcare and violence recovery services for women and girls in conflict settings are reversing hard-won gains. And the cost of this is clear. There is more warfare, mass displacement, and more extremism. We together must make sure that we reverse this trend. And here you, as speakers, as parliamentarians, have a critical role to play in addressing this challenge. By including resourcing, protecting and scaling up the leadership of young women and peace builders, championing gender and youth-responsive actions, ensuring accessible funding and creating safe platforms for the sustained participation in decision-making at all levels, we can all make a difference together. The global landscape of peace and security, it is also being reshaped by climate change. Research shows that out of 15 countries with some of the highest vulnerabilities to climate change, 13 are also grappling with violent conflict. So while climate change does not ignite conflict, it is intensifying existing vulnerabilities, escalating competition over land, water and food, and fueling displacement, instability and violence. And as we see in all conflict settings, when this happens, women and girls are disproportionately affected. For example, data from the UN Spotlight Initiative shows that femicide increases during heat waves, and 1 in 10 cases of intimate partner violence may soon be climate-linked. Yet, most peace-building and climate action and research remains gender-blind. So also in this field, there is a lot that remains to be done for us together. Another emerging factor in peace and security is the rise of digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, which is reshaping the global landscape of peace and security, bringing both promise and peril. While AI can support peacekeeping, humanitarian action, and conflict prevention, it also enables disinformation, cyber attacks, autonomous weapons, and targeted gender-based violence. UN Women's research shows that AI systems often reinforce gender and racial biases, harming women and marginalized groups. From deepfake abuse and online hate speech to algorithm-driven radicalization, AI is intensifying violence against women and exacerbating insecurity. Women in public life, including journalists, activists, politicians, and parliamentarians like you, face heightened risks. And in addition, technology-facilitated violence against women and girls, such as harassment, threats, deepfake abuse, and misinformation, is on the rise. Technology-facilitated violence against women and girls, it is not something new, but it has surged in recent years, and the COVID-19 pandemic brought increased attention to this. Certain groups of women experience disproportionate risks, including women of color, LGBTI individuals, and young women. New forms of violence mirror offline abuse, but it is escalated through AI and online misogyny. Radicalized online spaces are fueling both digital and real-world violence, including femicide. And when those technology systems mirror existing inequalities, including gender inequalities, they do reinforce discrimination, especially against women, girls, and marginalized racial and ethnic groups, both online and offline. Historical underrepresentation and stereotyping of women and minorities in data sets mean AI often perpetuates exclusion and violence. A lack of sex disaggregated data and gender-sensitive algorithm design further compounds those risks. And while AI has the potential to democratize access to justice, current risk assessment tools can instead result in unfair policing, biased outcomes, and even public harm. So, ladies and gentlemen, in the midst of all this, policy making has not kept pace, and we all need to step up our efforts. While steps have been taken, including landmark resolutions such as those on technology-facilitated gender-facilitated violence against women and girls, AI in the military domain, and AI for sustainable development, we must together push for greater tech sector accountability, quality data, inclusive prevention, and stronger legislation. I'm very proud to say that UN Women is leading global efforts to address technology-facilitated violence against women and girls, including a new legal guidance to ensure digital spaces empower, not endanger, women and girls. We must urgently embed gender analysis into AI governance, and without inclusive and right-based safeguards, its misuse threatens not only gender equality, but peace itself. So, of course, those legal guidances that we are developing can only become reality in partnership with you. And I want to stress how you, as women parliamentarians, are key drivers of change. Your leadership, inside and outside the halls of parliaments, ensures that diverse voices are heard, that legislation is crafted for a gender lens, with inclusivity at its core. And at UN Women, we count on your unwavering commitment to see that the most pressing issues affecting women and girls globally are brought to the forefront. We are here to support you, to work with you, and I look very much forward to a fruitful debate on some of the emerging issues highlighted. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this contribution, Mrs. Kaltrup. Esteemed colleagues, dear participants, I am pleased that this session is held in an innovative format inspired by the Doha debates as a way of stimulating lively exchanges. The Doha debate format involves focusing on different motions, with some participants speaking in agreement and some others presenting different views. For this session, we will have two motions to debate, and speakers and presidents have already indicated the motions which they'd like to contribute to. After such a pertinent video and women's leadership of acclimate action, let us start our debate on motion number 1, which is that climate change is gender neutral. It has the same impact on women and men. To share views that differ from the motion, we will have esteemed colleagues, and now I'm just announcing all the colleagues that are going to talk. Afterwards, I will ask everyone again to take the floor. We're gonna hear Mrs. Kuan Sundari, President of the National Assembly of Cambodia, We will hear Mrs. Candida Camisoko Camara, President of the Senate of Côte d'Ivoire, Mrs. Margarita Adamugi Dalapa, Speaker of the Assembly of the Republic of Mozambique, Mrs. Belinde Uwineza, Deputy Speaker of the Chamber of Deputies of Rwanda, Mrs. Nelly Butete Kasumba Muti, Speaker of the National Assembly of Zambia, Mrs. Sarah Kugongoleva Amadhila, Speaker of the National Assembly of Namibia, Mrs. Lachelle Aderli, President of the Senate of Bahamas, Mrs. Mabel Kohimona, President of the Senate of Zimbabwe, and Mrs. Angela Didisa, Speaker of the National Assembly of South Africa. So, my dear colleagues, let's start with Mrs. Kuan Sudari, the President of the National Assembly of Cambodia. You have the floor.
Honorable Chair, esteemed Speaker, distinguished delegates. Climate change affects different groups of people differently depending on their level of adaptability and adaptation capacity. For this reason, with due respect, I disagree with the motion that climate change is gender neutral. It is obviously not. Women and girls face disproportionate risks and burdens. Women face heightened risks, including financial instability, reproductive insecurity, health vulnerability, gender-based violence, particularly during climate-induced crises. Women in Cambodia and around the world are confronting the climate crisis head-on. They are learning to cope and adapt. Hence, they play a significant role in advancing climate change initiatives. But to allow them to participate fully, they need access to resources, education, healthcare, and decision-making power. To address these challenges, I would like to suggest a few ways forward by incorporating gender-responsive policy, strengthening women's leadership in resource governments, promoting international collaboration, and multi-stakeholdership. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And now I'm pleased to hear from Mrs. Candida Camisoko Camara, the President of the Senate of Côte d'Ivoire. What insights, please?
Madame la Présidente,
Chair, honourable parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen. To begin, we must note that natural disasters, prolonged droughts or floods affect both men and women. However, women disproportionately suffer the consequences of climate crises, including the impact of climate change, largely because women are the majority of poorer people around the world who depend on natural resources in local areas for their survival. In rural Africa, agriculture is generally socially structured. Agriculture is mainly reserved for men. However, growth and production is largely done by women. In this context, women are often charged with ensuring that their family have the necessary subsistence methods, including ability to heat their homes, water and food. Therefore, in periods of irregular precipitation or droughts, women living in rural areas work harder going further distances in order to ensure that they have wood and water, and spent more time in seeking income and resources for their family. This situation increases their work and imposes on them a higher burden compared to their male counterparts. Essential services, in particular sexual and reproductive health services, can also be disrupted, which has an aggravating effect for women and girls. In the face of this, initiatives have taken place in Cote d'Ivoire, and in particular, I would like to mention this project to strengthen climate change adaptation in the development program within the country, which aims to strengthen the gender dimension and awareness of it in developing programs by working in favor of rural women and proposing actions to increase their empowerment. We've also look to promote improved homes, which seek to improve forest resources and preserve them, while also improving situation for women who are largely responsible for collecting woods by improving their health and efficiency. Government has also produced a decree for the sub-prefectural committees for rural forestry management, which seeks to include women as representatives within these community organizations in order to ensure that we have a more equitable and effective response to climate action. I would also like to put forward 2 points of reflection, and clearly these are not exhaustive. First of all, we need to systematically integrate a gender approach into all climate policy, and secondly, we should promote women and rural women's access to property, to sustainable technology, and to proper weather data and to markets. This will ensure that women can themselves set out their own lives and adapt, looking for justice and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. And now I turn to Mrs. Margarida Adamugi Talapa, the Speaker of the Assembly of the Republic of Mozambique. I am very pleased to give you the floor, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, Excellency, Mozambique is one of the vulnerable countries to the climate changes. This vulnerability stems largely from our geographical location and our heavy dependence on agriculture, a sector that is highly vulnerable to climate change in rainfall patterns. In a 4-month period, we recorded 3 tropical cyclones, which caused loss of human life, including severe damage to public and private infrastructure, representing a major setback to our development process. We therefore bring to this debate the voice of a country that experiences a real and urgent impacts of the climate change in its daily life. Based on our experience, we have learned that the effects of the climate change are not felt by everyone in the same way. Children, girls, and women are the ones who suffer disproportionately and more severely from its impacts. This reality is due to a combination of social and economic factors such as poverty, limited access to resources and information, as well as the social and cultural roles traditionally assigned to women. In many developing countries, including Mozambique, women have primarily responsibility for securing basic livelihoods resources for their families. As resources become scarce, women are forced to travel long distances, exposing themselves to significant risks such as gender-based violence and human trafficking. Therefore, in order to effectively address the effects of climate change, it's crucial to adopt gender-sensitive approaches that recognize the specific vulnerabilities and needs of women and girls, to act in order to tackle them. We want to use our voice to call everyone here to use our voice and to influence the advocate in respective parliaments for the need to pass legislation, public policies that recognize the vulnerability. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you very much, dear distinguished colleagues.
Bineza, the Deputy Speaker of the Chamber of Deputies of Rwanda. The floor is yours, Ms. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you for the floor, Excellency President. Excellencies, honorable speakers, distinguished delegates, thank you for this opportunity to contribute to the important debate on gender and climate change. I respectfully disagree with the motion that climate change is gender neutral, affecting women and men equally. While climate change impacts everyone, it does not affect all people equally. Women and girls bear a heavier burden depending existing inequalities. Let me highlight 5 critical areas where this disparity is clear. First, due to social roles and the division of labor, women perform 2.5 times more unpaid care and domestic work than men, activities that became even harder during climate crisis. Tasks like fetching water or collecting firewood grow more difficult, adding to women's workload and vulnerability. Second, women's limited access to productive resources such as land, education, technology, and other social services makes them more vulnerable to climate shocks like floods. For example, in Rwanda, in severe floods that hit in May 2023, over 130 lives were lost, and 64% of those displaced were women and young children. The government of Rwanda prioritized the rescue and economic recovery, acknowledging these vulnerabilities. Third, women remain underrepresented in climate-related decision-making. Without their voices, policies risk ignoring their specific needs and knowledge. Fourth, climate disasters increase risks of gender-based violence, exploitation, and trafficking, disproportionately impacting women and girls. Finally, barriers to adaptation and recovery persist due to limited access to financial services and education. In Rwanda, only 11.8% of female-headed households had access to irrigated land compared to 78.3% of women-headed ones, limiting women's ability to recover and adapt. In response, Rwanda has integrated gender equality into climate policies. Our national strategy for transformation and the green growth and climate resilience strategy emphasizes gender-responsive disaster risk management, agricultural insurance, and inclusive relocation from high-risk zones. The Parliament plays a vital role by legislating and overseeing gender-responsive climate action, supported by dedicated caucuses that mobilize inclusive and coordinated efforts for climate resilience. As women leaders, we must reject the myth of gender-neutral climate change, actively promote women's meaningful participation in climate decision-making at all levels. Equally, we must ensure that adaptation financing reaches women-led and women-focused in climate initiatives. Only through such gender-responsive approaches can we build resilient societies that protect everyone equally from climate impact. I thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your insights. And now I'm pleased to hear from Mrs. Nelly Butete Kasumba Muti, the Speaker of the National Assembly of Zambia, your insights. Madam Speaker, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I thank you for this opportunity to contribute to this important motion. I rise to strongly oppose the assertion that climate change is gender neutral. It is not. In fact, in countries like Zambia, climate change magnifies pre-existing gender inequalities affecting women and girls the hardest. Madam President, let me illustrate this by highlighting Zambia's recent experience. During the 2023-24 farming season, Zambia experienced the worst drought in over a century due to El Nino. As a result, maize fields decreased by 30%. It should be noted that in Zambia, women make up the majority of small-scale farmers who are heavily dependent on rainfall. Therefore, women were more affected by the drought than men. Action Aid Zambia reported that women face heightened risk of violence, exploitation, and child marriage as food insecurity and economic stress deepened. Additionally, between May and December 2024 alone, Lifeline Childline Zambia, an organization dealing in child protection against all forms of abuse, received over 514,000 reports of gender-based violence and early marriage, mainly from drought-stricken areas. Madam President, you may wish to know that water scarcity forced women to walk more than twice the distance they normally cover to fetch water. As a result, some girls dropped out of school to support their families. Madam President, as I conclude, allow me to state that climate change is not just an environmental issue, but a gender justice issue. Its impact is not evenly distributed. It clearly impacts women more than men, and therefore, to claim that climate change is gender neutral is to deny the harsh realities of how countless women and girls are negatively affected by it in Zambia and beyond. Therefore, I stand firmly against the motion. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Let's now continue with the views of Mrs. Sahara Kwongoleva Atahili, the Speaker of the National Assembly of Namibia. The floor is yours, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the Presidium. I rise to speak against the motion that climate change is gender neutral. While climate change itself may be indiscriminate in its occurrence, its impacts are far from equal. Pre-existing gender inequalities shape how climate change is experienced. Women and men do not stand on equal ground when it comes to climate resilience. In rural areas, women are often the primary providers of food, water, and fuel for their households. When droughts dry up water sources or floods destroy crops, it is they who work further, carry heavier burdens, and endure longer days. This is not an abstract concern. It is a lived reality that disproportionately affects women. Furthermore, women continue to face limited access to land ownership, financial resources, and technologies, key tools needed to adapt effectively to climate shocks. This restriction is rooted in social norms and cultural practices that deny them the opportunities afforded to men. Climate-related disasters also increase vulnerability to gender-based violence, as displacement and economic hardship exacerbate power imbalances. Women and girls are more exposed to exploitation, abuse, and health risks, particularly during times of crisis. Women are highly concentrated in climate-sensitive sectors, such as small-scale agriculture and informal trading. When crops fail or markets collapse due to climate change, their livelihoods are the first to be lost, deepening poverty and social vulnerability. Even health outcomes are gendered. Rising temperatures and pollution levels pose particular risk to pregnant women and newborns. Increased malnutrition and poor sanitation, especially during floods, disproportionately affect women and children. So while climate change may not target any gender, the consequences of our changing climate land unevenly, falling hardest on those with the least resources and the least power to respond, women. Therefore, a gender-blind approach to climate change, or rather climate policy, will leave our women behind, and no nation can afford to ignore the resilience, potential, and protection of half its population. Our own national policy on climate change in Namibia recognizes these disparities and calls for human rights-based development, acknowledges that rural women and children will bear the brunt of climate impacts, and advocates for gender-responsive interventions in emergency and emergency risk management, agriculture, health, water, and economic policy. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Now, I'm pleased to invite you, Mrs. Lachelle Adderley, the President of the Senate of Bahamas. You have the floor, Madam Speaker, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Distinguished speakers and honorable presidents, I oppose this motion. Undoubtedly, climate change adversely impacts everyone, but in varying degrees. It is my view that in small island developing states like the Bahamas, climate change disproportionately impacts women more than men. In SIDS, women are the caretakers of their immediate families and are responsible for securing food, water, shelter, and enforcing the need for an education. As climate change intensifies, disruptions to agriculture and fisheries and livelihoods pose significant threats to women's roles and reveal our vulnerabilities. The increasing frequency of hurricanes and droughts can decimate crops and reduce fish stocks, directly impacting food security and economic stability. The statistics and research speak to this stark reality, as women are 14 more times likely than men to die in a natural disaster. A statistics that reflects the vulnerabilities they face due to social and economic factors. For example, out of the 230,000 persons killed in the Indian Ocean tsunami, 70% of them were women. In 2019, Hurricane Dorian devastated the second and third island economies of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, leaving women caretakers and children vulnerable and without housing, food, jobs, and more prone to physical, sexual, and emotional violence. Post-Hurricane Dorian, invariably men return to work much faster. Meanwhile, the women remain in the shelter without communication, emotional, nor financial support. According to UN data, in many countries, violence against women, environmental activists, and defenders of environmental activists' rights have become well documented. Violence against them have become well documented. Executive Director of the UNICEF reminds us that a climate crisis is a child's right crisis, and that children in a storm and flood-prone nations around the world are among the most vulnerable to having their lives upended. It is clear that the impact of climate change are profoundly intertwined with gender dynamics, revealing a stark reality where women often face disproportionate realities and challenges when compared to men. The antidote to this imbalance is having more women at the decision-making table. Women are frequently underrepresented in decision-making process related to climate change, disaster recovery, and resource management. This lack of representation means that our unique perspectives and need may be overlooked, further entrenching gender disparities. There is a need for more gender-sensitive legislation as it relates to climate change. Women need to be empowered through resource access, equal representation, engagement in the adaptation and migration. In closing, a gender-blind approach to climate change will only deepen existing inequalities. There is a clarion call for climate justice, gender-responsive legislation, and sustainable policy frameworks that will protect women and children. As leaders of Parliament, we are uniquely positioned to play such a crucial role. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam President. And now I'd like to give the floor to Mrs. Mabel Chinomona, the President of the Senate of Zimbabwe. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. It is vital to address the misconception that climate change is gender neutral, especially from a Zimbabwean perspective. In Zimbabwe, the effects of climate change are profoundly gendered, exacerbating existing inequalities faced by women in rural areas. Women, who make up a significant portion of the agricultural workforce, are directly affected by erratic weather patterns that threaten food security. They often lack access to resources and decision-making power, making them more vulnerable to the impacts of climate-related disasters. The aftermath of Cyclone Idai in 2019 serves as a stark reminder. In Zimbabwe, thousands of women were left without essential services, facing increased risks of gender-based violence and exploitation in displacement camps. Climate change also contributes to low levels of awareness and access to sexual and reproductive health and rights needs among women. These challenges illustrate that while climate change is a global threat, its impacts are not felt equally. Madam President, to address these issues, the Zimbabwean government has launched several initiatives aimed at protecting women from the effects of climate change. Programs such as the National Gender Policy, the Climate Change Gender Action Plan, and the Climate Change Response Strategy emphasize women's inclusion in decision-making processes. Additionally, the Women's Development Fund provides financial support for women-led projects that enhance resilience to climate impacts. Government departments are also supporting women's adoption of drought-resistant crops, efficient irrigation systems, and sustainable agricultural practices to enhance food security and resilience to climate variability. Addressing the complex challenges posed by climate change in Zimbabwe and elsewhere in the Global South requires a comprehensive and multi-sectoral approach. Empowering women is essential to building resilience at the community level, as women are largely at the forefront of food, land, and water management. This includes providing women with access to land, credit, and agricultural training, as well as strengthening their role in decision-making processes. Therefore, I urge this Assembly to recognize that, indeed, climate action must encompass gender justice. If we ignore the gender dimensions of climate change, we perpetuate systemic injustice and deepen the challenges faced by the most vulnerable, which is. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam President. And now I'm glad to give Mrs. Angela Diditsa, the Speaker of the National Assembly of South Africa, to ask her to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Honorable members, indeed I stand here to oppose the motion. As much as I believe that climate change affects everyone, it does not do so equally. Its impacts are shaped by social, economic, and political inequalities, making it distinctly gendered. If we fail to acknowledge these differences, climate change will remain an amplifier of existing gender inequalities. Women's lower labor force participation, lower wages, and high representation in agriculture, particularly at a small-scale level, and informal sectors, increase their vulnerability to climate shocks. They also face limited land ownership, restricted access to credit, and higher burden of unpaid care work, all of which reduces their ability to adapt and recover. Madam Speaker, I just want to make an example. If a flood were to happen, in most instances, women, while they know they might have to run away, they will have to think about their children, they'll have to think about their mothers, they'll have to think about their in-laws, all of whom who become a responsibility for women. But mostly men will oops and go, forgetting that they've got families. It is for these reasons that we argue that climate change is not gender neutral, because its impact affects more women than men. The ILO research shows that 80% of people displaced by climate change are women. This highlights gendered nature of climate-induced migration and the need for gender-responsive migration and adaptation policies by countries. South Africa is particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change due to its high levels of poverty, gender inequality, and dependence of natural resources. These vulnerabilities are compounded by climate-induced stressors such as droughts and heat waves, which disproportionately affect women and girls. A study conducted by local universities in South Africa analyzed data from 1,958 police stations across South Africa and found that there was a significant correlation between changing climate and poverty-related crimes and violence. The study estimates that if South Africa's average temperatures rises by 1%, the country could see an increase of 800 to 1,000 homicides annually, on top of the current figure of 20,336 homicides per year. In conclusion, Madam Speaker and honorable members, evidence is clear that climate change is not gender neutral. It deepens existing inequalities, disproportionately affecting women and girls. And therefore, as parliamentarians, we have a duty to ensure that our climate policies are not only environmentally sound, but also just. This means embedding gender equality into every aspect of climate legislation, budgeting, and implementation. It is within us to make such a change. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. And now I'd like to call Ms. Carolina Cerqueira, the Speaker of the National Assembly of Angola, to take the floor.
Our parliament has developed recently a summit on parliamentary action for food security. In Africa, the effects of climate change between men and women are determined by social economic structures which are rooted. This issue should be analyzed in several dimensions in order to understand why and how the women are more vulnerable and essential in seeking a solution. I want to give you some examples of the main factors that sustain our vision. The traditional division of the role of women in many countries of Africa. Women are responsible for livelihoods, fetching water and caring for their families. The droughts have affected more women than men. The unequal access to resources, as well as finding new technology, etc., the lack of support to women to have access of land and the legal right to health and security. This also affects the most the women with regards to climate change. The climate change aggravated the food security and water availability and affecting the most women and the child malnutrition. The natural disasters, this displacement expose women to the most violence based sexual violence in refugee camps as well as IDPs. The women are more vulnerable to drop out school, lack of access of climatic information, as well as emergency in areas of conflict. In addition to being the majority of the population in the biggest workforce in the agriculture, women do not take a decision with regards on the management of natural resources, climate adaptation, and so on and so forth. We have been taking a debate in our committees at Parliament, the issue of the food security, nutrition, and the role of women in this process, because we think that Angola is still a country where the family agriculture has a way, and we have effects of droughts that has been affecting the girls who drop out schools and have others several health problems which are aggravated by this scarcity of water. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for having me.
Switch off the mic, we cannot hear the chairperson. Now it's okay, but before. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
No problem. Thank you.
It's okay.
بسبب الكوارث المناخية. ووفق ما تشير إليه تقارير الأمم المتحدة أن 80% من النازحين بسبب الكوارث المناخية.
I'd like to mention 80% of displaced persons who are women. There was a technical issue. We now have interpretation. The technical issue is solved.
شكرا سعادة الرئيسة.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Climate change is certainly not neutral when it comes to gender. Yes, indeed, it does affect everybody, but it affects men and women differently depending on economic, social, and cultural factors. Climate change has an unequal and disproportionate impact on men and women. It impacts them differently in conflicts or in poor communities. Women and children are the worst affected because of displacements as a result of climate change. And I'd like to refer to UN reports that say that 80% of displaced persons in climate catastrophes are women. And we know that women are responsible for their households when it comes to a natural disaster, such as a drought or flooding. And this limits their access to education. We also know that women work to a large extent in the healthcare sector, which exposes them to bacteria and other health risks. Women also have limited access to fuel and to other resources, and also they do not have access to decision-making processes. And we know that this inequality increases in times of catastrophe. And violence against children and against women also increases in times of crisis. Consequently, we are aware of the following. Men's consumption patterns lead to a greater carbon footprint compared to women who are more likely to recycle and to use renewable resources. We know that men also are impacted in that they might lose their employment. For example, if there is a drought which affects fishing. Therefore, we do need to involve women in decision-making processes and in decision-making bodies. Equally, we need to offer protection to women activists speaking out to protect the environment in the interest of limiting the impact on women.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Deputy Speaker, for your very, very valuable insights. So, my dear colleagues, I would like to ask if any of the other colleagues, Speaker or President of Parliament, would like to make additional comments. We've now had only opinions of Speaker and Presidents that are opposing themselves in regard of this motion. Perhaps somebody else would like to take spontaneously the floor as well. We are open, we have time. Even though we would be interested to hear from any other speaker who may be in agreement with this motion, I totally understand. And now I'm speaking personally about what I've just learned and heard of all of you speakers, that I totally also understand that you all have a negative meaning regarding this motion. It was really fruitful and very important to listen and to understand and to learn from each other. Well, so my dear esteemed colleagues and dear participants, thank you so much for all the insights and also the dynamic contributions. Your views, they're very, very enlightening. And as I've already said, we can learn by those times when you really listen to each other. Several of you highlighted that while climate change affects all people, its impacts are often felt differently by women and girls, especially in contexts where social and economic inequalities exist and persist. We also heard valuable examples of how parliaments are responding to make sure that climate action is both inclusive and equitable. So what I think should happen now is that you're going to see another video. This powerful contribution on the topic of this session, now we move on to the next motion on artificial intelligence and online violence. The motion states that it is already too late to make AI gender sensitive and to legitimate violence against women online. We do have speakers that are speaking in agreement and in disagreement. The speaker in agreement with the statement, I'm pleased to hear we have our esteemed colleagues, Mrs. Antonia Naneseva, the Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of Latvia, and we also hear from Mrs. Kulmanova, the Chairwoman of the Assembly of the Turkmenistan, by video message. And then we're gonna hear and listen to the speaker who are in disagreement with the motion. And I am pleased to have our esteemed colleagues, Mrs. Turuan Sven Bjarmantodir, Speaker of the Althing of Iceland, and Mrs. Raymonde Gagne, the Speaker of the Senate of Canada, and also Mrs. Candida Gomis-Soto Camara, the President du Sénat de Côte d'Ivoire. So now I'm pleased to start with Mrs. Antonia Nanseva, the Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of Latvia. Madam Deputy Speaker, the floor is yours. And dear colleagues, if some more would like to add themselves to the list of the speakers, just let us know. Please now, the floor is yours.
Madam President, dear representatives, dear colleagues, I very much agree on the statement and motion. We are at the stage where us, the leaders of our nations, have to make a choice to set an example for positive AI development or to allow for the unethical and unpredictable rise of AI to continue. The thing is, AI is full of gender bias. It learned it from us, from stereotypes that live in our societies and continue to bloom every day. With the ever-changing flow of information, AI will become unstoppable. Now there are apps that allow to generate pictures and videos that undress young girls and women without their consent. Later, they are sexually exploited and mocked. Unfortunately, AI is largely used in scams, and this affects a significant part of the population, especially the ones that are already disadvantaged, like women. Gender-biased AI is not only a women issue, a women problem. It is a UN-wide issue, a worldwide crisis. We parliamentarians hold the legislative power, and it is our job to put our people's needs first and protect our future with effective and fair AI regulation. Though AI opens a lot of doors that previously did not exist, and it can be used for good if done right. Like closing the gap between genders, skyrocketing inventions, providing affordable healthcare, and much more. But allow this to be your wake-up call. AI will not wait. Thank you.
So now we're gonna have a video message by Mrs. Kulmanova. She's the chairwoman of the Assembly of Turkmenistan.
Здравствуйте, госпожа президент Уля Аксен. Здравствуйте, дамы и господа. В первую очередь желаю...
First of all, I would like to wish every success here at this session and thank you for the opportunity to speak through this video message to you, dear participants. Our independent and permanently neutral state, whose legal status has been recognized 3 times by the UN, continues to strengthen it this year in the International Year of Peace and Trust. We continue to work in an atmosphere of peace and creativity, good neighbourliness, mutual respect and understanding. We have a wide range of measures in our country to strengthen the legal foundations of Turkmen society, uphold democratic traditions and ensure the political, economic, social and cultural rights of every individual and citizen. The Constitution and laws of Turkmenistan enshrine the principles that guarantee social protection for all, equality between men and women, and equal opportunities for the exercise of their rights. Turkmenistan has recognized the UDHR and acceded to key international instruments in this area, including those on women's rights. As a result of humanitarian policies pursued by the President, strong social protection for each citizens have been assured, including for women. We continue to pursue opportunities to strengthen women's economic, social and labour activities, thanks to initiatives to expand women's rights and women's labour rights. Thanks to these conditions, Turkmen women are today widely represented in different branches of state governance, legislative, executive and judicial. They hold high-level leadership positions, play active roles in foreign policy and contribute significantly to charity, science and research. This comprehensive action contributes to the implementation of the Global Agenda for Women, Peace and Security, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and other multilateral instruments adopted under the auspices of the UN. Dear friends, today, parliamentary diplomacy plays an important role in the development of friendly relations. The development of cooperation among inter-parliamentary organizations and the expansion of inter-parliamentary dialogue underline the increasing role of parliaments in the global world. The 15th Summit of Women Speakers serves as an important platform to deepen cooperation between our countries, draw attention of the international community to the value of dialogue in building trust-based partnerships, and to reaffirm our support to this, thanks to parliamentary action, and to share valuable experiences. We would like to reaffirm our commitment to continuing cooperation in strengthening interstate ties, exchanging experiences in terms of legislative and parliamentary action for promotion of peace, sustainable development and gender equality around the world. In our country, various international events have been organized at various levels, including the Declaration of 2025 as the International Year of Peace and Trust, and also to celebrate the 30th anniversary of our country's permanent neutrality. We would therefore like to cordially invite you to these events. I would like to extend my heartfelt wishes to all of you for good health, continued success in your endeavours, and lasting prosperity and progress for your countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Deputy Speaker. No, Madam Chairwoman. And now I'm pleased to turn to Mrs. Tuoron Svenjebi-Jaternardottir. She is the Speaker of the Althing of Iceland, to share her views that differ from the motion. Madam Speaker, the floor is yours.
I beg to differ, to say it's already too late. It's only not defeatist, it's simply false. History shows us that complex societal changes or challenges, from civil rights to climate action, have seen transformative progress, not because the path was easy, but because people refused to accept that it was too late. AI systems are not static. They're constantly being developed, trained, and fine-tuned. What's trained can be retrained. What is important in my mind is that we come face to face with the fact that the social media giants, those who are now platforms like Meta, YouTube, and X, who already deploy AI are in private ownership, and therefore it's very important that governments in the public sphere set the legal framework for the use of AI. It needs to be done, and it needs to be done internationally. NGOs and researchers have built AI tools that detect misogynist language in real time, support survivors, and even predict online mob dynamics. The existence and successes of these tools prove that it's not too late, and we are just at the beginning of harnessing their full potential if the political will is there. Governments and institutions from the EU to the UN are adopting frameworks that require AI to be ethical and human rights based, and this needs to be done in the legal framework of every country in the world. The Istanbul Convention, UNESCO's AI ethic guidelines, and feminist digital rights movements all show coordinated international will. We are at a turning point. It is not too late. We have agency and we have political power, and we need to use that will today to make sure that the development of AI not only regenerates existing power structures, that is the patriarchy, but also reflects the necessary changes that need to be made in the world. And those changes include equality for all, education for girls and women, and political power and responsibility of women in all countries. Let's not give up. If we do that now, those biases that are indeed being regenerated will calcify. But if we act with courage, with clarity and urgency, it's absolutely not too late. It's exactly the right time to act. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm now pleased to call on Mrs. Raymonde Gagné, the Speaker of the Senate of Canada, to share her views that differ from the motion. Madam Speaker, the floor is yours, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, President.
To be here today, and I stand against the motion, and as I believe we still have time to improve artificial intelligence systems and make them more gender sensitive. Even AI systems themselves reject the idea that it is too late. I put this very question to Gemini and ChatGPT. They both gave me examples of how we can get there and detail the challenges we still need to work through. I would like to focus on one crucial point: the lack of diversity in development teams and in the AI industry. The exact figures vary depending on the source, but women currently represent less than a third of professionals in the field. Creating diverse teams made up of people from different genders, cultures, and races can help bring a range of perspectives to AI development. It also helps minimize the risk of bias and stereotypes, whether conscious or unconscious, being embedded in AI systems. To increase the presence of women in AI, we need to encourage more women and girls to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. At the same time, we must make these fields more gender sensitive and address workplace conditions that contribute to the loss of women already working in them. Of course, simply increasing the number of women on AI development teams is not a magic solution. It is just one part of the equation. To truly make AI gender sensitive, we must also address the biases and stereotypes that exist in society as a whole. Otherwise, even the most diverse teams risk reproducing existing biases. Making AI gender sensitive will require sustained and coordinated efforts from us. I truly believe we can succeed. It is our responsibility to ensure that the tools that are developed do not undermine progress toward gender equality. Women's rights must exist in the digital world as well. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. And now I'm glad to invite Mrs. Kandia Kamisoko Kamara, la présidence du Sénat du Côte d'Ivoire. Vous avez la parole.
You have the floor, madam.
Excellences, Mesdames les Présidentes, Mesdames et Messieurs, je tiens à vous faire part de ma profonde conviction, en totale contradiction avec l'affirmation selon laquelle il serait déjà trop tard pour rendre l'intelligence artificielle sensible au genre et éliminer la violence à l'égard des femmes sur Internet. Cela revient en effet à abandonner l'espace numérique aux logiciels discriminatoires, à accepter l'exclusion technologique des femmes et à considérer comme inéluctables les violences sexistes et raciales en ligne. En notre qualité de femmes parlementaires, nous avons une responsabilité collective, agir, influencer et légiférer pour une utilisation plus responsable et plus inclusive de l'Internet.
An inclusive use of the digital space. With regard to Côte d'Ivoire, we have an encouraging initiative through the adoption of 2 laws in 2013 relative to the fight against cyber crime. In 2025, Côte d'Ivoire made significant progress in digital space, supported by strategic initiatives and significant investment, as well as this has also been demonstrated by a number of indicators, such as the percentage of the population with access to internet, the improvement of infrastructure, the adoption of the national AI strategy in 2024, and these are significant milestones in our country towards more inclusive development. These strategies aim for the deadline of 2030 to ensure that all of the population can benefit from AI, both in rural and in urban areas. AI will therefore be considered as an important lever of promoting gender awareness and reducing violence against women. It remains the case that work is yet to be done, but to say that it is already too late would be to close the door to ethical regulation of artificial intelligence, to the fight against biased algorithms, and the promotion of equal digital content. Parliaments have a crucial role to play, one, by adopting preventive and forward-looking laws on AI and cybercrime, which are gender responsive. Second, through the strengthening of legal protections for women victims of digital violence. 3, the creation of resource platforms for signaling abuses that are easily accessed. And 4, the consideration of what can be imposed on AI companies to consider the social impact of their algorithms. It's never too late to act in favor of human rights. It's rather, we would be too late if we remain silent and sit on our laurels. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Présidence. And now I would like to hand over the floor to Cynthia Lopez Castro. She's a senator from Mexico and the president of the IPU Bureau of Women Parliamentarians. Please, the floor is yours, Cynthia.
Muchas gracias, querida.
Thank you very much, dear President. I'm speaking in my native language now. And I would like to speak about the major challenges that we have related to artificial intelligence as parliamentarians. A major percentage of women parliamentarians around the world have received some or been subject to some sort of violence, and this has often come through AI, as we know. The level of harassment that parliamentarians suffer is high, and this is often through social networks, for example on X, and sometimes we see it on Instagram or on Facebook. And all of those of us who have been victims nationally, we have to have regulation. And that is why today I would call on the 58 women speakers who are around in congresses around the world, and this is a significant force, to whenever you're sitting in front of your parliaments, that we try to adopt a legal framework that is clear and specific to regulate this digital violence that we are living around the world. As a chair of women parliamentarians, I have often seen cases where parliamentarians end up resigning their seats whenever they have a very active political career. These women end up leaving Parliament and abandoning their jobs as a result of the violence and harassment they receive. And that is why I think that it is very important that you, as women speakers of Parliament and presidents of Parliament, commit to the creation of a legal framework that punishes digital violence in parliaments, that sanctions violence against women parliamentarians. And I have to say that we have the Olympia law in Mexico, which has been approved in various Latin American countries, and the Olympia law, which is put forward by a Mexican activist, places onto the criminal code digital violence as a crime. So this is now a crime in Mexico. This has been approved in a number of other countries, including in the United States. And what we need to continue to do is to build legal frameworks to avoid political gender-based violence. And I think the majority of the women in this room have been subject of political violence at some point in our career. And lastly, I would like to recognize the leadership of the President of Mexico, President Sheinbaum, as I said, the first woman president we've had in 200 years. And as President of Mexico, continues to be subject to political violence every day, and people saying she does that because she's a woman, and continues to be subject of discrimination. And that is why I would call on all of us to make a strong legal framework for not one more woman has to resign her post for fear of digital violence. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Mrs. President. So now I'm glad to hand over the microphone to the Vice President of the European Parliament, to Mrs. Katrina Barley. The floor is yours, Mrs. Vice President.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Actually, I felt I should take the floor because the European Union, in fact, is the legal space that was the first to regulate AI in a broader manner with our AI Act. Which is astonishingly enough if you think of the impact that AI is having on all of our everyday life. And what is even more astonishing is the criticism that we have been facing for this, because all over the place we have heard that this might constitute a disadvantage for Europe in a global competition for investments in AI. Because everybody, everywhere else, probably not everywhere, but almost everywhere else, people are free when they design and establish AI. Now, as I said, AI is already changing all of our lives, and I think the impact that AI will have on our societies we cannot overestimate. There are scientists and even developers of AI that even say that as soon as AI can get rid of our human oversight and control, they will just take over. Just read an interview where someone said the probability of that is by around 20%. I don't know how he measured that, but well, I mean, we all see that the self-developing, this is important, the self-developing AI, they do not depend anymore on what we give them, what we feed AI, but they search for it themselves. So this is something that is will change our societies very much. So, and if we have a look at how young people generate their information, where they look for information, it is very often now ChatGPT and other sources. So I would very much agree with my colleague from Iceland. It is an ongoing development, and we have to stay on the ball. The biases are already there because, of course, these systems are only reproducing the biases that are already in the world. And probably you have all heard of the AI that was used for, it's a real example, to propose salaries for people applying for jobs. And this AI gave you very much lower salaries proposals when there were women involved, because they recurred to the salaries that are being paid in reality. And in reality, they are lower than men's salaries usually. So the reproduction is very clear, and we address those biases and these mechanisms in our AI Act. So I agree we must not give up, but the changes and the danger is real because they are self-learning systems. What do we need? We do need legislation. I truly, strongly believe in this. There is no other field, especially so existential, that is just left without any boundaries by legislation. But it will not be enough. We also have to influence what is the content that is in the digital space. So we also need science. We also need NGOs. We also need fact-based media to provide our digital space with reliable information that is not biased. The first condition is that we are aware of the problem, and that is why I am very grateful that you took on this question and that we can discuss it in this important conference. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much, Mrs. Vice President, Mrs. Barley, for your insights. Well, dear colleagues, I'd like now to ask if any other president, speaker, would like to make additional comments. You're welcome to react or provide additional insights as you'd like us to have some interaction here, please. Well, I think everything has been said. Thank you so much, esteemed colleagues, for this compelling and thought-provoking exchange. Today's debate on the statements on AI brought forward both conviction and caution. You have shared that the foundational structures of AI systems are already deeply biased and reflect existing inequalities, making meaningful reform a steep and possible unachievable task. Strong counterpoints were offered, highlighting the belief that through legislation, regulation, ethical oversight, and more women in science, technology, engineering, and math, it is still possible to shape AI in a way that upholds gender equality and protects human rights. The responsibility of parliaments to act urgently was underlined, not only to protect women and girls from online abuse, but to ensure that future technologies are developed with inclusivity and safety at their core. We also heard valuable country examples and policy proposals that demonstrate how parliamentary leadership can make a tangible difference. Esteemed colleagues, dear participants, we have now come to the end of our Doha-style debate. It was truly thought-provoking exchange, rich on ideas and diverse perspectives. I am confident that the points raised will meaningfully inform and guide our action in follow-up this summit. Is it okay? So, my dear colleagues, give us 2 minutes to wait till the president of the IPU, Dr. Julia Axon, will be with us. Thank you so much. Dear colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, as we come to the close of this deeply enriching 15th Summit of Women Speakers of Parliament, I want to thank each of you for your presence, for your powerful voices, and your unwavering commitment to peace, equality, and justice. Over the past day, we have come together not only as fellow speakers of Parliament, but we came together as women leaders entrusted with the hopes and expectations of women and girls around the world. We have shared our realities, we have listened, we have debated. What emerged from our discussions is clear. Peace is not simply the absence of war, it is the presence of fairness, of inclusion, and of opportunity. And therefore, peace cannot be sustained if it remains blind or gender equality, deaf of women's voice, or untouched by the hands of those who know conflict not as a headline, but as a lived experience. We agreed that women, peace, and security agenda is not merely a political framework. It is a moral imperative and a strategic roadmap. Because when women are excluded from peace talks, peace agreements fail. and diplomatic losses impact. When girls are kept and excluded from spaces where realities are shaped and decisions are taken, innovation stalls and injustice multiplies. This summit has proven once again that the solutions are within our reach. As speakers of parliament, we must champion multilateral cooperation. We must defend human rights and humanitarian law, and we must place gender equality at the core of our governance. We can and must shape peace processes that are inclusive from the ground up, where women's leadership is not an exception, but the norm. We know that it is not enough to support women's participation. We must actively enable it. From negotiating tables to diplomatic service, from parliaments to peace missions, we must break down the barriers. We must challenge exclusionary norms and ensure that institutions are designed to empower. This requires not only policies and budgets, but it requires a collective cultural shift, one that we, all together as women speakers, are uniquely placed to lead. At the heart of this shift lies mentorship and example. It is not secret that women and girls around the world look at us. They look at us for proof that their voices matter, that their dreams are valid, and that leadership is possible, no matter where they come from. And we cannot diminish their dreams. We owe them institutions that reflect their realities. We owe them leadership that lifts others up. We discussed the urgent need to address the climate crisis through a gender-responsive lens, to ensure that technology and artificial intelligence are governed in ways that uphold dignity and eliminate bias. Above all, we must shield women from the devastating physical and digital violence that still erodes their safety and limits their participation. These are not side issues, my dear colleagues. They are central to sustainable peace. We also recognize today the need for renewed trust in democracy. Our parliaments must not only legislate, our parliaments must also inspire. We must reach across generations, embarrassing younger women, particularly from underrepresented communities, and guide them into space of influence. Parity is not a distant goal. Parity must be our shared standard. And for that, we need to partner with men, all allies, in reshaping institutions, challenging harmful norms, and building truly inclusive leadership. Colleagues, in 2025, as we mark the 30th anniversary since the Beijing Platform for Action and the 25th anniversary of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, we are not just looking back, we are claiming the future. This summit has chartered a path forward rooted in inclusion, driven by solidarity and led by women. All these important statements and related commitments are included in the outcome document of the summit. I thank you warmly for having enriched it with your views, with your ideas and inputs, and I take it that this outcome document can now be adopted. Well, my dear colleagues, you have just received a small bell. It is a gift from me as the President of the National Parliament of Switzerland. It is a gift which has been produced in the city where I live. We do have there a 650-year-old clock factory. And this single bell, everyone, is a unique example for you to take back home. Bells bring people together for church service, for village gatherings, in emergencies, or this little bell also brings us together at the 15th Summit of the Women Speakers of Parliament. Hope you do enjoy it. Hope it will ring out in a very special moment. And I think now we do have also a very special moment. I invite you all to take in your hands your little bell, and so we can proceed together with the adoption of the declaration by belling this bell. So it is decided. Thank you so much, dear colleagues. This document will serve as a powerful expression of our shared resolve and will carry out our voices into our parliaments and nations, as well as into the 6th World Conference of Speakers of Parliament beginning tomorrow. All persons here in this venue will, when you're gonna leave this room later on, you will also receive a small bag of gifts for everybody from Switzerland, from the Parliament of Switzerland. You will find in your bag chocolate from Switzerland, a little notebook, and a little Victorix tool set, which is in the credit card format, which is accepted in all airplanes. But with that, it is my honor now to pass the floor to the President of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, Dr. Julia Axen, for her closing remarks. Thank you so much.
Madam President Rinica, Mr. Secretary General of the IPU, Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, dear friends, as we bring this summit to a close, I want to thank you all for the authenticity, strength, and solidarity you have brought into this space. Today we have heard one another, challenged one another, and encouraged one another. And in doing so, we have reaffirmed why this summit is not just important, but also it is indispensable. Let me take a moment to express, on behalf of us all, our sincere appreciation to our hosts. To you, Madam President Rinica, and to the National Council of Switzerland. Thank you for your warm hospitality and for your continued commitment to dialogue, inclusion, and peace. We are especially grateful to have held this summit here in Switzerland, the home of the Inter-Parliamentary Union and our parliamentary diplomacy. This setting is more than symbolic. It reinforces the strength of our shared values and the spirit of international cooperation that defines our work. We have stood together to reflect not only on how far we have come, but on how much more we must still do. We have reaffirmed the importance of our leadership towards inclusive, just, and lasting peace, with women and girls at the center. In this time marked by conflict, fragility, and rising inequalities, our parliaments must be part of the solution. As the world needs the wisdom of dialogue and the strength of inclusion, we must ensure that our parliaments protect rights, uphold dignity, and are able to foster peace. As women speakers of parliament, we have a unique and urgent role to play in this. The presence of so many of us in this room today was a powerful signal that can turn it into lasting transformation. The outcomes of this summit give us renewed purpose and a clearer path forward. We know what is needed. We know what action must be taken. I would like to call a sense of urgency. The calls for action will not always come in quiet moments. They come in times of crisis, of conflict, and of backlash. And as we see escalating violence and insecurity in so many corners of the world, impacting women and girls and their future so harshly, this moment demands that we accelerate our efforts. Central to such efforts must be the elimination of violence against women and girls at all times and in all circumstances. Acts of gender-based violence are not isolated incidents. They are rooted in societal norms and power structures that discriminate against women and exclude them. Whether it is harassment in parliaments, intimidation online, or the use of sexual violence as a weapon in conflict, all forms of violence against women in politics share a single aim: to silence, to deter, and to exclude women from public life. Addressing this requires more than just protective measures. It demands confronting and transforming the social norms and power imbalances that sustain such violence. And it demands justice for victims and the effective prosecution of perpetrators, because impunity fuels despair and erodes the very principles of democratic societies. Without safety, there can be no equality. And without equality, there can be no democracy or peace. Colleagues, friends, tomorrow we join our colleagues at the Conference of Speakers of Parliament. Let us bring into that space the conviction we have shared here that gender equality is not a chapter in peace, development, and democracy, but the thread that runs through every part of lasting peace, sustainable development, and strong democracy. Let us mobilize the whole parliamentary community to upscaling our institution in ways that reflect the full diversity and strength of our societies, that help forge peace, protect rights, and restore trust in public life, and that not only speak of equality, but deliver it. This summit must not end here. Dear colleagues, dear friends, let it carry forward in each of us, in the way we lead, in the way we legislate, in the way we drive peace, and in the way we support one another. Let us carry this forward together. That said, dear colleagues, I would like to request you, I forgot my bell, if you would excuse me. So we are going to do this 4 times, dear colleagues. The first one, we are going to ring the bell to say thank you to our auspicious hosts. Okay, thank you very much. And the second one will go to the Secretary General of IPU and the Secretary General of the National Council of our host here, the National Council. Colleagues, we are speakers, we are deputy speakers, we are distinguished delegates, but without the work of the Secretariat, it would have been very difficult to have put everything in place. That's why we have had to ring a bell for them. So that is already done. You want a second one? Thank you. Okay, so the third one goes to all the men in the House who are ready to support the women and the cause that we are fighting for. We have had to do that because we know when we are fighting for gender equality, when we are fighting against gender-based violence, we can't fight that alone. We need men together with us. So the men who are in the House have to be particularly recognized. Thank you for joining us. Colleagues, now the last one. Let me take this opportunity to declare the 15th Summit of Women Speakers of Parliament officially closed. Thank you so much.